Hi, I'm August Keller, and here is my ranking of all the MCU feature films from my least favorite to my favorite. At number 36, Captain America Brave New World. This is the one that I'm closest to disliking. I don't actually dislike any of the MCU movies. The worst ones I find to just be boring and different. Brave New World, I feel like is just like a bunch of spare parts. I can see there are some pieces of good stories in it, but there's a lot of different things going on, and I feel like they don't come together as one cohesive whole. I don't think I dislike it, but I am close to disliking it. I find myself very, very indifferent towards it, almost disliking it. Speaking of very indifferent, at number 35, I have Ant-Man and the Wasp. Out of all the MCU movies, this is the one that's most like nothing to me. I just don't feel anything at all when I watch this movie. It is, I think, more of a cohesive story than Brave New World, and Ant-Man and the Wasp is more kind of focused, and it does its thing cohesively and competently, but I also find it very nothing. At number 34, I have Thor: The Dark World. Again, this is a story that makes no impact on me. It's probably more cohesive than Brave New World. It's a little more convoluted than Ant-Man and the Wasp, maybe. But the reason I have it here is that I think Patrick Willems pointed out that this this is one of the few MCU movies shot on film, so some of it actually looks kind of pretty, especially the exterior shots on Asgard. Kind of has like a golden glow to it. And this low down, that's pretty much all I need to move it from 36th to 34th. Similarly, at number 33, I have Black Widow. Again, a movie where the story is nothing to me. It's more cohesive. But I think the second act I kind of like. There's a sequence where all the characters are in a cabin or a small house together, and they're just kind of having these little conversations. It's very character driven. I don't remember much about it, but I remember liking that. And, that actually made me feel some emotions, at least temporarily. So yeah, that's that's enough to get it to 33rd. At 32, Iron Man 2. Again, we're grasping at straws here. I don't remember much about this movie. It didn't really make an impact on me. But I do like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. He's great at it, and this is early on when he's really kind of hitting his stride with that character. So, that's enough. I like Sam Rockwell doing a little dance. That's about it. At number 31, some people might be surprised I have it this high. Some people might have this last, but I have The Marvels. Again, the story I don't remember at all, really. The villain, I completely forgot. For the life of me, I could not remember who the villain was in this movie. I had to look it up. But what I do like is the opening sequence when the three main characters are switching places. I found that to be genuinely fun. It's a sustained sequence, about, 5-10 minutes of movie where I genuinely liked it. And this far down, that's enough, honestly. I can't say that much about the movies below. I don't think there's really a 5 to 10 minute sequence in any of the other movies that I mentioned that I actively liked. I also like the young lady, I forget her name, the actress's name, but the young girl who's playing Miss Marvel. I think she's got a lot of good energy. So there's that. At number 30, I have Captain Marvel. I actually debated swapping these two. Captain Marvel is a more cohesive story. It's just fine. I'm very indifferent towards it, but it's, this low down, it's all pretty interchangeable to me. What I could say about Captain Marvel versus Ant-Man and the Wasp, they're really in the same kind of boat for me, where it's a fine story. I think Captain Marvel's is more cohesive, more concise. It's not as convoluted. It doesn't have like the sequel-ness of it all. So it's just a fine little origin story. I didn't like it. I didn't dislike it. It's just kind of there. On that note, The Incredible Hulk I have at 29. Another fine origin story. This one has a little bit of nostalgia for me, and this is where I get to play. It's my favorite, not the best. I think if we were ranking best, I would have The Incredible Hulk lower, actually, because in isolation, I actually think it's kind of boring. Very, very thin and standard. It has all the minimum beats of a origin story, but other than that, it's very feels very minimum. But I think one reason I give it points is because it is in phase one and because it has that excitement of being, back when this movie first came out, it was very novel, the idea of having these movies cross over. And, I give it credit for being, an essential part of phase one and being a major building block. Number 28, here's another one that I know people dislike, but I think I clearly like more than most, is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I like when movies are weird. I like Jonathan Majors as Kang. I'm not trying to comment on who he is as a person. That's a completely different story. But he as an actor, as Kang, I thought it really worked. Yeah, it's a weird, quirky movie. It's kind of ugly to look at, MODOK especially. But the world building, I wish they had done that movie right, because I think it was a fun premise. Them being in the quantum realm would have been really cool if they hadn't. It hadn't been such a kind of a misfire. I like the weird swing rather than the bland swing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. At number 27, I have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I know this is kind of low for a lot of people, but, I just find it to be another standard, whatever, origin story, along the lines of Captain Marvel. And I think the difference, the reason I have it a little bit higher is I do like the hand-to-hand combat. The sequence of him on the train or on the bus, I think that was pretty fun before it kind of got cartoonish. But when it was early and grounded, I really liked that. And it's just a competent, fairly concise movie besides that. So, yeah, that's enough to get it here. At number 26, I have Eternals, which is probably another unpopular opinion. I think for me, I really like the cinematography. It's very Chloe, I think her name's Chloe Zhao, the director. I like her golden lighting style. The movie's overstuffed and all the characters, there's just too many characters. But I did like some of the stories going on. If they had just trimmed down the characters and focused on the main 4 or 5, I think that would have been a pretty interesting movie. But I think the cinematography buoys it for me. At number 25, I have Thor, which might feel low to some people. Again, I think this is just another standard, pretty thin origin story. I like the cinematography some. Kenneth Branagh is doing a lot of Dutch angles. A lot of people have made fun of that. I think some people maybe want to say it's Shakespearean, because, he's got his daddy issues, his brother. It's very family and dramatic. And Asgard is our first time going to Asgard, so that's kind of nice. I think maybe calling it Shakespearean's a bit much, but I see where people are coming from with that. I do think the movie is kind of boring, to be honest, which is why I can't get myself to rank it any higher than this. Again, it's just phase one, so I appreciate it for that. At number 24, I have Avengers: Age of Ultron, which this movie gets a bad rap too, and I think it's a lot of the criticism is fair. I think the story is kind of self-fulfilling, the way, they create a conflict and then they fix the conflict by doing the same thing again. I really do have a big problem with that. I think that's a real, that makes the whole story seem futile in a way. I think there's too many characters, of course. The Avengers movies, they're crossover movies, so they don't have a lot of time for character development, but I think the other Avenger movies do it better. So yeah, it's a fine movie. It's got that comedy tone that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But for the most part, I just kind of find it messy, and so I don't know. It's a crossover, so it gets buoyed for that. It's a bigger spectacle, but I don't know. At number 23, I have Deadpool and Wolverine, which I know is an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people really like this movie, but frankly, I see a lot of similarities between this and Quantumania, which I think is a very unpopular opinion. Our heroes go to this strange foreign land. The story's kind of convoluted. The character development kind of happens sporadically, isn't necessarily earned the whole way through. The villain in this I found very forgettable. She's okay. Of course, there's a lot of fan service, a lot of humor. This movie is probably more fun, the most fun out of all the movies I've named so far. So that's really what's raising it up this high. Of course, Hugh Jackman's acting as hard as he can to do the best he can, and he does a great job with what he's got. But frankly, the fan service, I'm just not, I don't care about that stuff as much. I'm much more interested in the storytelling, which is why, I can't really raise it much higher than this. I think the story is kind of a mess. And I know people aren't going to like me saying that, but I mean, the plot is hard to follow, honestly. I mean, they get sent to a place and they had to get out. I mean, that's the essentials, but the details of it are just like, what? I'm just going to not worry about that. At number 22, I have Ant-Man. I think some people might think this is a bit high. It's another standard origin story. I think this one's got comedy to it that works okay. I want to believe that there's some Edgar Wright echoes in it, but I don't think that's really true. I'm not really sure. Paul Rudd is funny. That guy Chris Pena, I think is his name. He's funny too. I like the way they depict Ant-Man when he's small. I think that's really fun. Like the sound design is pretty cool with that. That's enough. I mean, the story is competent and concise enough. It's forgettable, but that, I guess, all those other strengths are enough to get it this high. At number 21, I have Doctor Strange. I would say this movie is fine. I think I like it, I would say, at this point. This is just a competent origin story. It's not, it follows a similar formula. The villain is kind of forgettable. But, the whole magic, dojo, mysticism of it all, him being like in an Eastern place, that makes it fun. Like the psychedelic depictions of magic are kind of fun. The way he defeats our stalemates, Dormammu at the end, is kind of clever. So all of that, it's a fine movie. I would say it's pretty good even. And that I kind of like this movie. At number 20, I have Spider-Man Far From Home. I don't know if this is going to seem high to people. I know this is the forgotten Spider-Man movie. I really like Jake Gyllenhaal. I think he's a great actor, and him playing the villain here, I found pretty convincing. Speaking of psychedelic, I think the way Mysterio puts people in hallucinations, that was pretty fun. I really like Tom Holland as Spider-Man, Peter Parker. I think he's got that boyish charm that works for me. And yeah, Zendaya's and him have chemistry, of course. So yeah, I mean, I would say that this movie is fine to put on. If you put it on, I'll watch it. And I kind of like it, I guess. At number 19, I have Captain America, the First Avenger. This movie I'm kind of torn on because I think the first half is pretty good. The second half kind of really gets messy. But I think that first half really carries it. We establish Captain America. And I think Chris Evans does a good job really locking down that character. Really just the grace of the first act, the first half of the movie where we establish who Captain America is and earn his he kind of, I don't know if he arcs, but it's close to an arc. And I don't know. This is the first movie out of all of them where I start to really kind of feel emotionally invested. Okay, here's a non-popular opinion. Number 18, I have Thor: Love and Thunder. I don't really get the hate for this movie. In a lot of ways, it reminds me a lot of Ragnarok, and Ragnarok people seem to like, and Love and Thunder people seem to hate. And I think that vast difference is hard for me to justify. I think Ragnarok is obviously better. I have it ranked higher. But Love and Thunder, I think, is, doing some things. I think Christian Bale is a great actor. I love seeing his face. He's motivated. His motivation is pretty simplistic, but he does have a decent motivation. I liked some of the final battle is black and white, which I think is interesting. The comedy doesn't always work, but it works sometimes. And I always like the weird ones where they're in outer space and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not mad at it. At number 17, I think this is another movie that I think people don't like, but I think maybe the hatred for this movie is kind of cooled, which is Iron Man 3. I like that it's intimate. It spends a lot of time with Tony Stark in a small town, not really necessarily having his his Iron Man suit and kind of having to do some soul searching, which I found generally effective. I like character stuff. I like the emotions and the drama behind that. So yeah, that's enough to get it here. And of course, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. being Iron Man is always a plus. At number 16, I have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. You know, that opening sequence I found very effective. I know this may be partly, I mean, obviously part of that has to do with Chadwick Boseman's tragic passing, and, you know, the movie kind of acknowledging that. So, I mean, is that fair to give the movie credit for that emotional effectiveness? But it affected me. You know, that opening sequence for T'Challa's funeral really hit me. And, you know, the rest of the movie, it's bloated. There's some B plot lines that I don't like. But, you know, Shuri's, you know, she's definitely got some emotions going on. And I think that stuff really works. Angela Bassett, you know, she has a really moving scene. The villain, Namor, is interesting enough. So yeah, I like I like some things about this movie, and I don't think it's bad. At number 15, I have Spider-Man: No Way Home. I know this is going to be low for some people, but again, I must remind people that, you know, the spectacle, the crossover stuff, the fan service, while I do appreciate that, I'm not ready to just consume that only. I want more. I want that to be like kind of an accent around a good story. And I think the story of this movie has some things that work and has some things that don't work. I think the whole, you know, onset, you know, the multiverse of it, I found pretty contrived. And, you know, them having to get them back, I also found, you know, it's just kind of a lot of yada yada stuff that you have to kind of just like forget about so that you can just get into like, you know, having the characters be where we want them to be. I like the downer ending, you know, that Peter Parker has to like lose everything at the end. But besides that, and, you know, Aunt May, she has some interesting scenes, but besides all that, I think the emotions are kind of lacking. I would say emotionally, I'm more invested in a couple of the movies I ranked below this, but because of the spectacle, I am buoying it this high. Speaking of spectacle, a spectacle movie that I maybe have ranked lower than others, Captain America: Civil War, I have at number 14. Again, I think the story, you know, it ends with some like an intimate conflict between Captain America and Iron Man, but again, I do feel like it's sometimes kind of contrived. You know, it's introducing a lot of political ideas, you know, a lot of like morality themes, but I don't think the movie actually really wants to go there and actually unpack these ideas. It wants to just kind of use them as like window dressing, which is fine, you know, but you know, it's hard for me to rank this higher because I feel like it's just kind of contrived, and it's kind of just, you know, about putting these characters to fight, and then they're not actually fighting. No one's really out for blood, not until the very end. And then I feel like the movie still kind of doubles back on that. You know, Iron Man and Captain America are still like friends, even though if they're mad at each other right now. You know, it would have been nice if they were really truly like enemies to end the movie. Then I would rank this in the top 10. At number 13, I have Spider-Man: Homecoming, which might be a little high to some people, but you know, I really like Tom Holland as Spider-Man. He's got that boyish charm. I really like that this movie feels high school. I know some people might want to say this has kind of got some John Hughes kind of vibes to it. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but I see where people are coming from. You know, I really feel like, you know, he feels like a teenager, which is nice and gives me like a nostalgia blast. I also like the Vulture as the villain. I like that he's a working man and, you know, complaining about blue collar problems. It feels very grounded and relatable. So yeah, I think overall this movie I think this is a good small scale movie where, you know, the final conflict feels almost street level, which I like. And yeah, I think Tom Holland as Spider-Man was a really good pick. So yeah, I want to put it here. At number 12, surprise, surprise, I don't know if this is high to some people, but I have Thunderbolts. Now, I like Thunderbolts because it really feels intimate. It really feels like it has substance. It's talking about mental health and, like abuse and depression, things like that. I think the story is a little bit convoluted there. I think there's a few too many characters. There's a few too many like ancillary threads going on with like uh, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Is that how you say her name? Elaine from Seinfeld. I know she's the villain, but I think she has a few too many scenes that are kind of like baggage for the MCU franchising, and the movie could have been a little more streamlined. I think if the movie had been a little more concise, I could have like gotten it into the top 10. And maybe upon reflection I will move it into the top 10 eventually. But right now I think having it in the top 10 or top 12, is I'm saying something. I'm really trying to endorse this movie. And gosh, why is the cinematography got to be so bland? But I mean, you could say that about most of these movies. Anyways, at number 11, I have Black Panther. I think the cinematography, for one, just while I'm on that thought, is one of the better cinematographies in all of the MCU. There's a few nice shots that I liked. Of course, there's some good world building. There's some good representation, which is important. I think it's got one of the best villains in all of the MCU. I do think the third act is pretty like boring and generic, unfortunately. But other than that, this is a good movie. So I have it at 11. At number 10, I have Iron Man. Now, it has a lot of the same flaws and as anything I can say about most MCU movies, I could say about this. I think, frankly, it's a pretty, in a vacuum, I think it gets a little too much credit as a film. I think in a lot of ways, the best part of this movie is its end credits scene, which is a big deal, actually. I think that end credits scene completely changed the landscape of film, like blockbuster films for the next few decades. So, I mean, that's a big, like, I know it sounds dismissive to say the best part of the movie is this last little scene, but that last little scene was pretty huge. And of course, having Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, I mean, that is such, that's a casting choice that like has defined the last 2 decades. So those are 2 big deals. I think besides that, the movie is fine. Iron Man does arc, which is nice. The final confrontation is generic and kind of lame, but those strengths are big, and it's the movie that started it all, so I have to give it credit for that as well. At number 9, I have The Avengers. Again, I think this movie deserves credit for being, maybe looking back, it's not so impressive now, but at the time, this was the movie that really pulled it off. This was the first crossover movie, and it was very novel at the time. It was the first of its kind, and it was amazing that they were able to do it and that they balanced all the characters. Like I said, with to contrast it with Age of Ultron, I feel like all the characters have their time to shine. They, I don't think anyone really gets lost in the shuffle. The villain, I think, is Loki is one of the better villains in the whole MCU. I mean, I think the conflict is pretty generic, but the action is decent. I don't think it's the best action in the world, but it's, I think, on the upper half of action in the MCU. And yeah, it really established all the stuff that we know and care about. I mean, Iron Man kicked it all off, but I think Avengers really solidified it as a real true and real thing. Okay, at number 8, this might be my hottest take. This might be the one that people get most upset at me for, and I think this might be what defines my list. But I have Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness at number 8. And I know this movie is very disliked. I don't really get it because, and I think to put my argument as most concisely as I can, Sam Raimi is the director of this movie, and he's a great director, and I think you can really feel his direction in this movie. I don't think it's a full blown Sam Raimi movie, but I think it's more than glimpses. Like Black Panther is directed by Ryan Coogler, and I think Ryan Coogler is a great director, but I don't think he gets to stretch his legs all that much. I think you get glimpses of Ryan Coogler throughout Black Panther, but I think in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, you really get to, it's more than just glimpses. I think you really get to feel Sam Raimi here. You know, there's the final sequence with Zombie Strange, which I thought was just delightful. I loved Zombie Strange. There's a lot of like editing and sound design that feels very Sam Raimi, like stings. There's a lot of match cutting that I liked a lot. I also like that the villain. I don't know why people don't like it, but I like that Scarlet Witch is the villain in this movie. I think she's motivated. She has like sympathetic reasons for doing what she's doing. And yeah, the multiverseness of it all is, you know, maybe underwhelming. I think that's why people don't like this movie, but I do think it does some things on that front that are kind of fun. Not as fun as they should have been or could have been, but they're there. Like there's that final battle between him and Evil Strange where they're like doing like some music kind of manipulation. That was kind of cool. I don't know. So yeah, I think it's out of all the MCU movies, this one has some of the most stylized filmmaking, and I'm a sucker for that. So I really actually genuinely like this movie a lot. At number 7, I have Avengers Endgame. I mean, what is there to say about this movie? I think the reason I have it this low is because it does feel like more towards fan service than story. You know, it's a lot of just payoff. You know, we're just getting to see all the stuff that we've been waiting for. You know, Infinity War sets it all up and makes us feel like we can earn it, and then Endgame feels like we're getting what we wanted. And you know, I just like feel bad movies more than feel good movies, to be honest. And you know, Avengers Endgame, you know, it's just a lot of fun. And, you know, it does have a good, strong ending. You know, there's a lot of downerness to it. It feels like an end of an era, and that's all great. And, you know, you could talk me into ranking it higher, honestly, when I start laying it all out. But yeah, I think just it's a good movie, and obviously it's a defining movie of its decade. But I think these other movies ranked above are just a little bit better. At number 6, I have Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I think in some ways this is the most contained MCU movie that's just good. You know, it feels like kind of almost like a Mission Impossible movie sometimes, and I think that was a great route to go with Captain America. You know, and it brings up some political ideas and some themes. Again, I don't know if it's going all the way through with them, but I think it takes them to more interesting places than something like Civil War does. And yeah, I think this really kind of solidified Captain America. So yeah, I think it's the most compelling story outside of all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and outside of the spectacle movies. At number 5, I have Thor Ragnarok. This is again another movie that feels like it's made by a director. I feel like the Taika Waititi's. I feel like his touches on this movie, his sense of humor is very much working here. I like, you know, like I said before, I like the weird stuff where they're in outer space. And I do think there's a lot of color and vibrance and music. This is just like a really fun movie. And it does have some emotions in it. Not really. I think that's the one thing that's holding it back from being better, is that I think it's a little too playful, a little cheeky. But yeah, I feel like it's got an artistic touch, and it's fun. So I actually like this movie. Like, I think it's genuinely a good movie. At number 4, I have Avengers: Infinity War. I think this might be the most popular movie. I think if we took a poll, I think most people would say this is the best movie. And, you know, I get why it is to a lot of people. It's the spectacle movie. It's a downer. We get to, a lot like the Avengers. I think it gives everyone time to shine. No one really gets lost in the shuffle. And what's incredible is that there's just so many characters. I mean, how many characters are in this movie? 30, 40, 50, and almost everyone is balanced well. It's really impressive that they were able to pull that off. I think this is clearly the best spectacle crossover movie of all the most well executed. And yeah, I think there's some artistic touch to it, especially with how it ends. So yeah, I like this movie. At number 3, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. You know, I think this movie doesn't get enough credit. I think in some ways it's better than Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, we get to explore Peter Quill's relationship with his dad. I do think, and then Yondu, that whole thing with him at the end feels very emotional. And yeah, I love James Gunn. He's got a good grasp of humor, and he's able to balance humor with drama, and they don't detract from each other. It's both funny but also sincere. I think, you know, there's just, I mean, I really like this movie, and I don't have much bad to say about it. I think I just like the other Guardians of the Galaxy movies better. At number 2, I have Guardians of the Galaxy. I think while this movie isn't as good as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I think it deserves credit for being the first one. It really sets everything up, and I think everyone comes together well, and it's a lot of fun. It doesn't get as emotional as Volume 2 does because, you know, Volume 2 explores Peter Quill's relationship with his dad more. But it's still a lot of fun. It still does touch on, you know, their inner demons, and it came first, and it really set the tone, which is, I think, harder to do. It's harder to blaze the trail than expand on the trail, if that makes sense. Okay, and at number 1, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm an animal lover, and I am a sucker for that whole Rocket Raccoon storyline. Rocket Raccoon is my favorite character in all of the MCU, and you know, his backstory is very dark and made me cry. This, out of all the MCU movies, this is the one that actually made me cry. I know that the Rocket Raccoon storyline is kind of buried in a less good movie. Like, everything around the Rocket Raccoon storyline isn't as good, and I would say is some of the worst stuff in all of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. Like, you could make an argument, actually, that this is the worst of the 3. I mean, I don't think I would say that, but I could see someone saying that and making a good point, because, yeah, the Rocket Raccoon story is great, and everything around it is not so great. Is kind of, I don't want to say mediocre, but kind of a letdown compared to the core. But that core is just so good. I love it so much that I just can't. I don't have the heart to rank this any lower than 1. I love this movie, and I can't believe I was crying over a cartoon raccoon, but there I was in the theater doing that. And, you know, I do like the aesthetics of a lot of the spacey, trippy, weird stuff they're doing. I don't think everything around Raccoon is bad. I think there's redeemable stuff. Peter Quill is definitely conflicted. You know, Gamora and him going their separate ways, I thought was very bittersweet. So yeah, the James Gunn balance of humor and drama all works. I think the villain is good enough. He's pretty detestable, but still feels like he's not like just a cartoonish villain. So yeah, I really like this movie. I love this movie even. And yeah, I don't say that about a lot of MCU movies. So there you have it. That's my whole list. I hope I made decent points. My logic, at least, is justified. I understand that no one's going to agree with my list exactly. But, you know, I hope also that I made decent points and that you can see where I'm coming from. And maybe I even made you think about a movie differently. I'm not sure. I mean, at the very least, I appreciate you watching and getting this far in the video. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. If you like what I'm doing here, please feel free to like and subscribe. I also have an Instagram linked in the description. I'd love support there or here, whatever you can do. I appreciate. But at the very least, like I said, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.